What's going on, everybody? This is Token Gaijin here with the second part of my Sith Assassin comprehensive guide. And here we are in the fleet station next to... Oh, it's not even a juice box ambush. What's his name? Assistant Kanoa Butthole Face. There's also one in the Sith fleet if you want to respec your guy. Show you right. He's right up here, as you can see on the map. And on this guide, instead of the first guide, which we focus more on player versus environment builds and more just well-rounded general builds, we're going to be bringing you player versus player builds, or PvP builds. And player versus player, for anyone who's newer to MMOs, are game types or matches or open-world environments where you fight other game players for the chance to be the best. Now, I'm on a player versus environment server, or PvE server, so you really don't have as much open-world kind of interaction with PvP type fighting as you would on a PvP server. And I'm not really quite sure about the role-playing server, but that'd be something interesting to check out. But if you want to do PvP on this server, I know that the open world PvP, I don't think it's up yet, but it might be. I'm not sure. They were working on it when I left originally to take a little break from the game, but now that I'm back, I still have yet to check it out. But if you want to flag for PvP, hit this little button down here and it'll queue up the multiple game types. There are several to choose from. They're coming out with more PvP war zones as well, but all you have to do is queue, or you can queue as a group and do ranked if you want. That's just basically how you pull up PvP, and basically there are various game types of PvP, but PvP varies a little bit differently. And I can give you one very big piece of advice. If you have the ability to play PvP, if you're subscribed, or if you're not, if there's a way that you can actually start playing, if you really want to get into player versus player, and you're subscribed or you're not, start early. The biggest thing about player versus player is you need to get commendations to get player versus player gear. And if you start early, I think you can start at like level 10 or 15, somewhere in there, going into PvP. Do start early. I wouldn't suggest that early. I always just suggest around 25, 30. Because if you play enough player versus player environments while you're leveling up, you can actually start just massing up commendations for that PvP gear at the end game. And the reason that that's really, really crucial is PvP gear and PvE gear should be kept separately. One of the big things about SWTOR, as is with many MMOs, is that if you haven't played many MMORPGs, usually you want to have different sets of gear for different situations. And while other MMOs are a little bit more just hardcore about it, like I remember when I was playing Final Fantasy XI, which is something that I played for a long, long time, that I had like 6 sets of gear and each one was for different endgame events. You really don't have to go that crazy in this game. I would recommend highly that you have a different set of gear for player versus environment and player versus player, and really make sure that it highlights exactly what you're going for in your build in both of those things. Now, if you are going to be switching between player versus player and player versus environment, you also have to make sure that your builds are different, and we're going to be going over that today in this guide. So for PvP guilds, we're going to be looking at a Darkness, Deception, and Madness PvP build. And also, at the end of this video, I'm going to also go a little bit into rotations. Now, rotation moves can be different based on how you like to play, but I have 2 rotations that I actually found that work quite well. I found them online. They've been working really, really well for me, and I want to share them for you. And I can't have the credit for these rotations. Someone else, somewhere else built these. But these are the ones that I've been rotating with. They've been really, really working well for me. So to start things off, let's get down to the builds, because PvP is all about making sure you do 2 things. 1, take out your opponents as fast as possible, and 2, hitting those objectives. So our builds are going to be looking at helping not only our team reach these goals, but also helping us spec as best as possible to be annoying as fuck. Because the big thing about PvP is you have to be annoying. You have to play to your class's strengths, and you have to play them well. And one of the things that the Sith Assassin has really well going for it is actually it's got CC. And CC is a little short way of saying crowd control. And if you're not really aware of what crowd control is, it's basically the ability to tie up a crowd of enemies in a big environment. A lot of jobs usually have this ability in MMOs. There's always like the one job that kind of focuses on it. I'm not really too sure if one specific job in the Old Republic just bosses at crowd control, but Just bosses. Wow, that's terrible grammar right there. I don't know if there's just one class that's just absolute boss of crowd control, but I've seen the Sith Sorcerer and the Jedi Consular, I think that's the Sage, really doing well with the crowd control. But the Assassin can do a pretty good job too. Look at this guy. Wow. His Zalek is pretty decked out right there. But we're going to be looking at basically the 3 ways to build, and crowd control is really, really important player versus player. And the reason being is, in player versus player, you get into these situations where you've got, like, 10 or maybe the 10 people, like, just rushing a single point, and you're trying to either defend it or attack it. And you need to be able to not only just tie down multiple opponents, but stop multiple opponents from getting the objectives. And you can see that in a lot of other, like, Novaria Coast, or you can also see that in... can't remember the other one. Not so much Hut Ball as important. I mean, it's still important in Hut Ball, but Novaria Coast is a good one that I always see crowd control. Also, Alderaan Civil War is a really, really good one, and Void Star. It really just crowd control really just helps you control those vantage points, and that's really, really important because when you're trying to defend an objective, you need to make sure that the multiple opponents that are rushing it are stopped in their tracks. So we're going to be looking at builds that not only help us do some crowd control, but also give us some survivability, and also allow us to put out damage just based on what we're doing. So going into the builds, you remember these 3 trees if you watched the first video. Know them well. We have the Darkness tree, which focuses on defense. We have the Deception tree, which focuses on damage and mostly melee damage. And we also have the Madness tree, which is just this awesome tree of just crazy shit. And we're going to be looking at a Darkness-focused build, but this is kind of a hybrid build. My Darkness build is a little bit different for PvP. It's kind of a hybrid between both Darkness and Madness, and here's why. You can really just spec full Darkness if you'd like to. Defense is really important in PvP because you're going to have a lot of players wailing on you and trying to take you the hell down, especially as an assassin. They find you nothing is more annoying than a Sith Inquisitor or a Jedi Consular. I don't know what it is, but every time I play PvP, it seems like these 2 classes are getting just trolled on by other players. That and the Sniper. The Sniper is just another one that people love to just group up on. So my kind of Darkness build doesn't just focus on tanking and survivability, because tanking is all good and done and well said and everything, but you really need to make sure that you're also getting enough crowd control and the ability to tie down opponents, because the real main focus of being a Darkness tank is focusing on defending all those objectives and other players, and also tying down everyone else. If you're doing a Darkness build for PvP, don't focus on trying to kill other players. Focus on trying to tie other players down where your teammates get the objective. Now, you can go for the objective if it's clear. I'm not going to say don't go for it. I mean, that's going to win you the game. But this build is going to help you to be the defensive team helper. And trust me, you get points for helping out your team or tanking for them or tying up opponents. So make sure you're taking advantage of that, because a lot of people always go, well, I want all the points for making the kills and the medals and stuff. Yes, you can be that guy, but if you are helping your team by taking those big opponents out, and also by just controlling the crowd, they will really benefit from what you're doing. So starting off, let's start off with what we're going to be going into the Darkness tree before we move into what we're going to get for the Darkness build in the Madness tree. We're going to start off with Lightning Reflexes, and Lightning Reflexes is always a good thing to start off with, especially because when you successfully shield, you get those nice deflected attacks, you recover 2% of your total force, and that's really just good for helping you, just not survivability-wise, but also get some recovery in. And we're also going to be going for Thrashing Blades. Now, Thrashing Blades, of course, increases the damage dealt by Thrash, Lacerate, and Voltic Slash by 3%. Voltic Slash isn't going to be in this build, but Thrash and Lacerate, you want to make sure you're also getting damage output, because in PvP, you need to kill players off. The more you kill, the more time that you have between them respawning to just buff up and prepare for the next wave, because every time you kill somebody, I think except for Alderaan Coast, you have to wait to respawn, because there's like a little gate that sometimes comes up and it just blocks you from going in. So killing players is very, very, very important, because it can really fuck up the enemy team. And we're also going to be getting Charge Mastery, and Charge Mastery is always important because we're going to be, like I said last time, always keep a charge on. And if you remember, for the Darkness tree, you want to make sure you're using Dark Charge. Dark Charge is the most beneficial thing to use with the Darkness tree. Dark Charge for the Darkness tree, you're going to be using the lovely Surging Charge for Deception builds. And then for the Madness build, I usually go for the Lightning Charge. That's just the way I like to do it. You can do it differently, but that's just how I feel is more beneficial playing with those trees. Those are the charges I think mesh the best with them. So going on to the second line, we're actually going to be bypassing Shroud of Darkness. While endurance is important, you really should be focusing more on getting endurance through your gear rather than just through your tree, because there's going to be more things in the Madness tree that are beneficial to this build as opposed to Shroud of Darkness. But we are going to be going for Lightning Recovery, and this increases the amount of force recovery by lightning reflexes by 1% additional. When you shield, parry, or deflect an attack, the active cooldown of Force Shroud is reduced by 0.5 seconds. That's pretty good to have, especially in PvP, since you're always going to be kind of flooded by enemies, attackers. You want to make sure you're keeping your force regeneration to an all-time maximum. Reason this is simply because in these situations, you can't always take advantage of the fact of resting. Sometimes they're just going to relentlessly keep coming at you, so as much force recovery as you can get is really going to help you out in PvP situations. And we're also going to be going for Swelling Shadows. And Swelling Shadows increases the chance of your Dark Charge applying its effect by 7.5%. Dark Charge is a very, very good ability. Remember, we're always going to be trying to have it on us, especially in PvP. You want to make sure that that shit is on your lightsaber. So make sure you get this awesome Swelling Shadows ability, because it's really going to help you out. Now, in this next line, we're going to be getting a little bit of everything. We're going to be getting Disjunction, which activating your force speed allows you to move movement impairing effects, which you really, really need in PvP. I cannot stress enough how many times your opponents are going to try to tie you down or debuff you. In PvP, especially, not so much in PvE, but PvP is where you're going to have a lot of enemies trying to use some bullshit moves to just stop you in your tracks. You want to get Disjunction. This is going to really, really help you get out of those sticky situations and get a lot of those impairing effects off of you, especially when you're trying to move around, because the Sith Assassin needs to be mobile. So Disjunction is probably one of the most important little things you're going to be getting in these skill trees. And we're also going to be getting Energize. And Energize, when your Dark Charge is active, which it should be, you're going to get damaged up by Thrash, Lacerate, and Assassinate. It has a 30% chance to finish the cooldown on Shock and make your next Shock a critical hit. This is very, very good. And we're going to be getting in conjunction with another ability. So trust me when I say Energize is going to be a very valuable tool in this build, because Shock is also going to be very valuable to you in this build for player versus player. So put a point in Energize. It's only 1 point. That's all you got to worry about. Just get it. Because trust me, nothing is better than just getting a cooldown on Shock reset and being able to critical hit it. And not only that, it upgrades Lacerate, Thrash, and Assassinate. 3 moves you're going to be using a lot. So trust me when I say that is a very important thing. And Dark Ward, which Dark Ward surrounds you in a dark ward with 8 charges that increases your shield chance by 15% for 20 seconds. That is very, very good. It's going to help you to defend, and while we're not going full tank in this build, Dark Ward is going to really, really help you when enemies are trying to gang up on you. And we're also going to get 1 point into Premonition. You could go more into Premonition. I don't really recommend it. The only reason I'm putting a point into it is to get up to this next line, because it's really the only way I can get there. You want all 3 of these abilities. I mean, some people can say, oh, you can bypass one. I would not bypass any of these other 3 abilities just to go 2 into Premonition. The only reason you're really getting Premonition for this build is just to get up to this next line. So don't over-spec into Premonition. And we're going to be going for Hollow. And Hollow increases your shield absorption by 2%. In addition, when you activate Overcharge Saber and Dark Charge is active, you instantly heal 5% of your total health. This is amazing. Like I went on before in my first guide, always get Hollow. Just always get it. Hollow is really, really, really good. I use Overcharge Saber a lot, and you should always try to have Dark Charges active as much as possible. And if just using Overcharge Saber allows you to heal instantly 10% of your total health, why not benefit from it? So make sure you have Hollow selected. If you're going into a Darkness build, just have it. It's super freaking good. And we're also going to be going to Blood of the Sith, which increases the rate of which your force regenerates by 10%. And like I said, force regeneration is very pivotal in PvP, because you never know when you're going to be given a break, because people will just keep coming and trying to ruin your shit. So make sure you have as much force regeneration as possible. Now, moving up to the next line. This is actually going to be the last line that we have in the Darkness tree. And I know it's kind of a weird thing to think about, because usually you try to go for the last ability. But while Wither is a good ability, it's not going to be something that we need to really focus on in PvP. It's a nice ability to have, but we're going to be going for another third ability. You're going to get a third ability, but it's something else that not only that I love a little bit more, that's going to be a little bit more beneficial for that crowd control aspect of this build. So what we're going to get in this line is we're actually going to get Force Pull. And the reason why we want to get Force Pull is not only just useful just in general to pull enemies towards you, it's really going to screw up people in player versus player. If you see anyone getting an objective or someone trying to take advantage of their positioning, use Forceful, bring them down to your level, and really destroy their advantage. If you have ever played against a freaking Trooper Commando or a stupid-ass Sith Sniper, you know exactly what the hell I'm talking about. Those assholes will try to get as best vantage points as they possibly can. Get the high ground. Try to take you. I know Obi-Wan said it. I have the high ground. It's over. Well, fuck you, Obi-Wan. I'm going to pull your ass down and beat the shit out of you because that's what you want to do. You want to make sure that you get those snipers and those troopers and anyone that has a better range against you down from the little nests, down to your level in a range where you can just take the hell out of their health. And trust me, usually a lot of the classes like to play it safe from behind cover. They are really going to be a disadvantage if you force pull them out. So use force pull to your advantage. Just get it. It's going to be something that you don't use as much in PvE, but in PvP, you definitely want to use force pull to your advantage because it's really going to piss a lot of people off. Now, we're also going to be getting Eye of the Storm. And Eye of the Storm increases the armor by 20% and allows Spike to be used while out of stealth mode. Spike is a very, very useful ability, and using it out of stealth mode is just really beneficial to not only just dealing out damage, but also tying opponents down. So I would definitely recommend getting at one point in Spike. And then we're going to be finishing off our Darkness tree by getting Electrify. And Electrify increases the threat damage dealt by Shock by 15%. And like I said a little bit earlier, when we're going into Energize, Shock is going to be playing a very important role into this build, because Shock, once it goes through part of the Darkness tree and part of the Madness tree, can really, really be amped up to a level of just ridiculousness. Because Shock doesn't really cost that much, and you can fast cast the shit, and plus its cooldown timer really isn't that bad. So Shock is something that you can easily spam in this PvP setup. So make sure you're getting anything that benefits Shock in this build, and that's exactly what we're kind of going for. Now that we're done with our Darkness tree, as you can see, we really didn't get too far. We didn't go too crazy. It's kind of a little bit different than a PvE build, but that's okay, because while we do get a lot of tanking benefits, we're also kind of going more for that crowd control aspect and survivability mixture, as opposed to just simply going all-out tank. Because an all-out tank in PvP really won't benefit anyone really that much. And I know it's kind of stupid to say, but players are a lot smarter than AI, because players can be taunted and just be like, I don't really give a damn. I'm just going to go for somebody else. But AI really can't do that as much. So you really need to make sure that you're concentrating on just defenses and crowd control abilities. That's what we're going for in the Darkness build. Make sure you remember that when you're going into a PvP setting, not to spec completely into Darkness, or you're going to be at a big disadvantage. Now, moving over to Madness, we're going to be getting 3-point exploitive strikes first. What exploitive strikes does is critical hits with the force attacks increase your melee critical chance by 9%. Very, very good thing to have. I usually recommend that if you have some spare points and you're really not spending them anywhere, Exploitive Strikes is really good to have. I have it a lot in my builds. So always keep in mind getting Exploitive Strikes. And also we're going to be getting Sith Defiance, which helps us tank. It reduces the damage taken. Now moving up to the next line, what we're going to be getting is Chain Shock. And this is what I've been talking about advancing Shock. We already talked about getting cooldown reset on Shock and also giving your next shot critical hit. What Chain Shock will allow us to do is it gives us a chance that when you activate a Shock, you have a 45% chance when you put all 3 points in here to activate a second Shock, dealing 50% normal damage. Now, not only this, but if we have Electrify, it increases the damage dealt by Shock by 50% already. So your second Shock is going to deal 65% normal damage if it goes off. So this is an amazing setup for Shock, because not only can you reset the cooldown on Shock with Overcharged Saber, you can also get a stronger Shock off, and that first Shock could be a critical hit, and the second one could be 2. So you're looking at a ton of damage output just from one move alone, which is not very hard to cast. Shock is a very, 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 very low force point ability. It's very quick. It's very easy to use. It is just a phenomenal ability, and putting all of these points into buffing Shock is really going to help you out in your PvP game. If you're really making sure to pay attention to your rotation with Shock, make sure you're using it properly, everything like that. It's just really, really important that you make sure that you are getting off everything that you need to do. I mean, just finishing the cooldown on Shock is just an amazing thing to do. Make sure you're using that Thrash and Lacerate, get that Shock cooldown out, and start spamming the hell out of them. And we're also going to be getting Torment. Now, the reason why we're getting Torment is it reduces the cost of Thrash by 1 and Shock by 6. Because we're going to be spamming Shock a little bit in this build, I mean, we're going to be trying to double cast it, get some criticals off of it. You want to make sure that we're going to be reducing the force cost of it. That way it's a little bit easier to use. So definitely get Torment. Not only that, Thrash is going to help you not only just deal a little bit more damage, but also it could reset that timer for Shock. So you want to be using Thrash a lot and Shock a lot. And Thrash also is not very force intensive, so that's really, really going to help you out. Now, moving up to the next line, like we said about crowd control, we're going to go for my favorite move of all time, the Death Field. The all-encompassing 1,135 to 1,200 internal damage and healing move that I love to use. Now, Death Field is so useful in this build for one reason. You can just spam this shit in front of doorways. If people are trying to get things from a distance, you just put it down in a doorway, and you will stop them from getting that objective as long as Death Field is active. It is amazing for crowd control purposes. It is amazing for PvP, and it is such a good ability that I try to get Death Field as much as possible for PvP. This is why it's my favorite move. It can heal you. It does a shitload of damage. It can hit 3 targets. Trust me when I say in player versus player, if you can get Death Field, get the Death Field. Just trust me, it's that good. Just do it. Now, moving on, we're going to get Fanaticism because I am fanatical about my Death Field and it's a buff for it. Get 2 points so that we can reduce the cost of it, so that way we're not as intensive in our force use. And we're also going to get 2 points into Claws of Decay because it increases the critical strike dealt damage by Thrash. Since we're going to be using Thrash and Shock a lot, that's very, very important to get. And our last 2 points, we really have 3 points technically. So I'm going to get 1 point over here, and I'm going to get into Raise. And what Raise does is melee attacks that strike a target affected by your Lightning Charge discharge effect have a 60% chance to finish the cooldown in Crushing Darkness and make your next Crushing Darkness activate immediately. We're going to be using Dark Charge a little bit more than Lightning Charge, but still, Discharge effect is pretty good, so you can actually use Lightning Charge just to get the benefits of Raise. And you can switch between them. Sometimes it's what a lot of players like to do, especially if you discharge Dark Charge, and then you're waiting for the cooldown, and then you go to Lightning Charge for a while, and then when Dark Charge gets back up, you can switch back. So that's something to keep in mind. You want to be cycling your charges if you're using Discharge constantly. Something that a lot of people like to do is utilize Discharge a lot. So make sure getting raised is something that you really want to make sure you kind of do if you're doing this hybrid build. And the last 2 points are going to be going into Haunted Dreams. And that's because Haunted Dreams lowers the activation time of Whirlwind. Whirlwind is a very powerful tie-down move. And also, it really, really is nice to have an advanced Whirlwind because remember, you're trying to get that crowd control, so you're going to be able to throw down Death Fields, Whirlwinds to tie up opponents, and remember, the Sith Assassin has a ton of stuns, abilities to just tie down opponents, and that's exactly what we're going to be going for in this build. So this is the build we're kind of going for. This is how I recommend doing a Darkness build. Now, it's not 100% going to be the best build for everybody, but this is how I like to use it because it gives me the ability to not only pull people towards me, but to throw them in a Death Field of hate. I'm going to be able to throw my Whirlwinds down, get my stuns down, and not only that, I'm going to be able to spam Shock and Thrash constantly. And just spamming Thrash will actually help me out in the long run because it's going to help me reset the timer on Shock as well. So trust me when I say this build, why it is more built for tanking and also crowd control, it's really going to also allow you to get out that damage output that you're going to need. And it's also going to allow you to throw out moves really, really relatively quickly, which is exactly what you want to do when you're doing crowd control. As the tank in PvP, you want to make sure that you're focusing more on tying opponents down than you are just taking their direct damage. It's really more about survivability and being an annoyance than it is about being able to tank all their damage just constantly. So that's something to also keep in mind, because player versus player environments are a lot faster paced. So make sure you're spec'd properly, and this is how I like to do it. Now, you can change it up a little bit just based on your taste, but this is a very, very well-rounded build if you're really used to Darkness. And it's also a way for you to use a Darkness build and to get Death Field, because Death Field, if you haven't used it, is very fun. So if you like the Darkness tree, if you like being more of a little tank and get a little bit more crowd control in, try this build out, because Death Field is a very, very fun move to use. Let me get a little drink there, because I have been sick. I do apologize if I sound a little nasally. I have been trying to fight off a cold that I've been getting. But that is this build. Let's move on to the Deception build. I'm just going to reset. That way I don't have to keep talking to this butthole face guy because he's really fucking annoying. So let's reset. Now, let's go into Deception. Deception is not going to be much different than our original Deception build. The great thing about the Deception tree in general is it's very well rounded for PvP off the get-go. But we're going to show you here a little bit of a different build that's a little bit more beneficial for PvP. But if you've already built the Deception build the way I showed you in the first video or something similar, just keep in mind that Deception is already built really well rounded for damage off the get-go. So you really don't have to change it up. You don't have to change it to this build because there's really not much of different with it. But if you do want to, you always have that option because I'm going to show you how to make it a little bit more beneficial towards player versus player environments as opposed to making it a more necessity build. So we're going to start things off with Duplicity. And Duplicity gives you direct damage attacks, have a 30% chance to grant exploit weakness, cause your next Maul to deal 30% more damage, cost 75% less force. That is extremely good because it not only makes Maul very, very cost effective, it also gives it more damage, and also it gives you a 30% chance of stacking the exploit weakness, making your opponents far weaker. So trust me when I say that is something that you want to consider getting. So get Duplicity. Now we're also going to be getting 2 points into Dark Embrace, and that helps your stealth mode because while in stealth mode, and for 6 seconds after leaving stealth mode, force regeneration is increased 50%. Like I said about PvP, force regeneration is crucial to the build, so make sure we're getting points into that. Now, moving on to the next line, we're going to get Obfuscation, and we're going to be increasing your effective stealth level by 3 and movement speed by 15. Since when you're using the Sith Assassin, you're going to be in PvP especially, you're going to be using that stealth to your advantage. Make sure you get Obfuscation. I think that's how you pronounce it. And talking about stealth, let's take a second to talk about stealth. Stealth for the Sith Assassin is the ability to cloak yourself so people can't see you. Stealth works differently in different games, but in this one you actually turn freaking invisible. So that's something really, really beneficial. Now, you won't be using stealth as much in player versus environment, unless it's kind of the way your guys like to start off fights as you going in as a secondary tank, which happens. Don't get me wrong, it does happen, especially when you're fighting bosses with ads. But in player versus player, use stealth. Get used to using stealth. Use it often. Use it proudly. Use it to your advantage because stealth is really going to allow you to screw players over. Trust me when I say this. I have gone into so many player versus player games and seen a Sith Assassin or a Sith Sorcerer or a Jedi Consular and their two Sage, or I think it's the Shadow, use stealth to not only become invisible and pop up, stun the hell out of half your team, and then just disappear again, and you don't even know what the hell just happened. So trust me when I say nothing is more aggravating than a Sith Assassin who knows how to use stealth. So not only should you upgrade your stealth, learn how to use it. It's just stupid ridiculous when you learn how to use stealth. Super useful. And trust me, it's really going to benefit your gameplay. So trust me when I say get Obfuscation. Now, we're also going to get Recirculation, and that reduces the cooldown of Discharge, which is also something that's really, really good. Discharge is something you should be using often. And we're actually going to be putting 2 points into Avoidance. Now, if you saw the other build, we only put 1 point into it to get to the next line, but we're actually going to be going for those 2 points into it because it reduces the cooldown of Jolt by 2 seconds, Unbreakable Will by 30 seconds, and Force Speed by 5 seconds. And since we're in a player versus player environment when all 3 of these abilities are extremely useful to not only breaking away, but moving around the map and getting stuns off, you're going to want to get Avoidance. So trust me when I say get the 2 points into this. It's really, really useful. Now, moving on to the next line, we're going to be getting Surging Charge, because if you don't get Surging Charge, you're not playing this class right. I've said it before. If you're doing Deception, get Surging Charge. And we're also going to get Induction right off the bat, because that increases the critical strike damage of your surging damage dealt by Maul by 30%. In addition, Thrash, Assassinate, and Voltic Slash have a 100% chance to grant Induction while Surging Charge is active. Like we said, you're going to be using all these abilities constantly, especially Voltic Slash. So make sure you get Induction. It's very, very good. Now, moving on, we're going to get Dark Swell. And exiting Stealth Mode now finishes the cooldown of Blackout. And Blackout can now be used out of Stealth Mode, granting 6 seconds of Dark Embrace and restoring 10 Force. While Dark Embrace is active, all damage taken is reduced by 25%. In addition, Force cooldown reduces healing done and received. So trust me when I say Dark Swell is something you're going to be wanting using, because like we said earlier before, in PvP, use stealth to your advantage. If you're not using stealth to your advantage, you're not going to be able to get the jump on people, and that's exactly what the Sith Assassin really is effective in doing. Sith Assassins are really, really well built for PvP. Other classes are better at PvE than they are, and I still think the Sith Assassin was the best well-rounded classes for PvE. But PvP is where a Sith Assassin can truly shine, so make sure you're using their abilities and their stupid, ridiculous, very diverse move set to your advantage. Now, we're also going to be getting a point in Deceptive Power, and this increases your total force by 10%, or by 10. Not bad, because we want to get as much force as possible for those moves. Moving on up, we're going to get Saber Conduit, which increases the Surging Charge's 100% chance to restore 10 force when it deals damage to an enemy, which is really, really good, because anything that'll help us regenerate force is something that we're going to want. Also getting Fade, because it reduces the cooldown of Blackout by 15 seconds and Force Cloak by 3 seconds. Additionally, it reduces the damage taken by area of effect by 30%. This is very, very good, because in player versus player environments, AoE moves are extremely common. They're not just common, they're the norm. There are going to be times where you'll be hit by 2 or 3 at a time, so trust me when I say get Fade. It's really going to help you shrug off a lot of that damage that could just overwhelm and kill you. Because most of the time, I'll be honest, most of the time when I'm playing as my Sith Assassin, I get killed by AoEs. I don't get killed by single targets. So it's one of those things you really want to make sure that you're being mindful of. Now, this is where the deception tree gets a little different. Usually when I get these points, I can move up to this bar, and we got Entropic Field, and we also went up and got Resourcefulness. We're going to be skipping these 2 abilities this time around, because Static Cling is far more beneficial. Remember, crowd control is essential to player versus player. So increasing the duration of Force Slow and reducing the cooldown of Force Slow is going to be extremely beneficial to our build, and we're going to make sure to get 2 points into that. Now, moving on up, we're going to make sure we get some Low Slash going on, because Low Slash is extremely powerful, does a lot of damage, and can incapacitate the target, which, remember, we're trying to get that crowd control down, so make sure you can incapacitate or stun as many people as possible. Get yourself some Low Slash. And then we're also going to get Static Charges, which increases our Surging Charge damage dealt, and you have a 100% chance to build a Static Charge, increasing the damage dealt by your next Surging Charge discharge by 6%, and it stacks up to 5 times. So you can keep stacking this sucker. Once you're at 5 stacks, just unleash it for some hurtful shit. Now let's go up to Crackling Blasts. And Crackling Blast, we're going to put 2 points into that, because it increases the critical strike damage dealt by your discharge effect by shock by 50%. Very good to have. And we're going to get Magnetism. Now, Magnetism is something we completely bypass in a player versus environment kind of build, or just a general build. But Magnetism is something you want to get when you're playing in player versus player environments, because when your target recovers from Spike's knockdown, target's movement speed is slowed by 70% for the following 3 seconds, which means right after they recover from that Spike, they're still going to be slowed for a little bit, allowing you to tie them down and either stun them again, or to just lash out a very, very powerful move. So make sure you get this, because it allows you to keep an enemy from moving. The Sith Assassin is built to tie down opponents, to get that crowd control, and above all else, be a giant douche. Now let's get Voltic Slash, because why the hell would you not get Voltic Slash? It is a super powerful ability. It attacks twice, and it can dish out a ton of hateful damage. And also, each use of the ability increases the damage dealt by shock by 15% for 15 seconds. And shock is an ability that a lot of people use constantly, and we're going to be using it in this build as well, because shock is just useful to have as part of your rotation. It doesn't cost much force, it deals a lot of damage, it hits quickly, so trust me when I say, make sure you're looking into getting shock. Now that we've completed all of the deception build that we're going to be doing, we're not putting any more points into deception, we're going to be taking a look at darkness and madness. Let's go to madness first, and we're going to get 3 points into exploitive strikes, because critical hits with force attacks increase your melee critical chance by 9%. Very useful to have. And also Sith Defiance, because it also helps you to survive a little bit more by reducing the damage taken. And it's a lot more useful than Crackling Charge. I mean, Crackling Charge is okay, but I feel like Sith Defiance and Exploitive Strikes are just so much better than that ability. So we're going to be getting those instead of 2 points into this instead of Sith Defiance, because I'd rather have Sith Defiance points. And we're going to get Chain Shock, because by using Voltic Slash in rotation, you can actually get a secondary shock off. And since shock is such a very useful move to use in the first place, because you can get it off multiple times, it's something that you want to be getting, especially when you're trying to get a very high damage output build. Now moving over here, We're going to be also getting 2 points into Thrashing Blades because Thrash, Lacerate, and Voltic Slash are 3 moves you're going to be using a ton. Now, as you can see, this build doesn't variate much from my Deception build that I first posted out, but a lot of people were asking me, they're like, why did you bypass getting Chain Shock? And the answer is simple. I didn't just bypass getting Chain Shock because I think that it's not useful for a Deception build. I think it's more useful in player versus player than it is in player versus environment. And in player versus environment setting, you're just trying, when you're a damage dealer for the party, when you're in like a party of 4, or even if you get an alliance going, you need to make sure that you're doing as much constant damage as possible. Getting out these shocks and things like that multiple times, or just quick shocks, are way more annoying when it's in player versus player than it is just kind of beneficial for overall damage. I find that for more overall damage, the build that I gave you in PvE is just better for just damage, just pure damage output. I think that this build is better for mobile fighting because shock is a lot easier to hit against mobile targets. And the thing that Deception kind of suffers from in player versus player is the fact that a lot of its charge, or a lot of its abilities, are close ranged. So you really have to get in to use them, and because of that, shock is going to be very beneficial because it's going to give you the ability to spam a ranged ability. So for PvP, I would highly recommend going the Chain Shock route, which I had some people asking me about. But if you're going for a player versus environment, I still think that the Charge Mastery route is a little bit better for you. I still think Charge Mastery and getting the Entropic Field and Resourcefulness as opposed to Static Cling and Magnetism Focus is far more beneficial to your build. That's just my opinion. I mean, you could go for this build in player versus environment because that's kind of the thing about this Deception build as opposed to the one I already gave you. This is just the one that I kind of feel works better in player versus player as opposed to the other one. That's just me. I mean, you could go with this entire setup and then just move these over and get instead Entropic Field and Resourcefulness. But I feel that I just feel that Charge Mastery is better for a player versus environment build. That's just me. That's after using it a lot, but to each his own. If you feel that if you feel like Chain Shock is more beneficial, then go for it. Who am I to say what is definitively better? I can't one way or another. I just find that I fare better in player versus environment with Charge Mastery. So that's it for the Deception build. Let's move on to the Madness build. Now, Madness is, like I said, probably one of my favorite trees to go in. And this build, as well, is very Madness-oriented. The great thing about the Madness tree that I really didn't kind of notice when I was going from 1 to 50 or doing more player versus environment my first time around, when I say Deception is better for damage dealt, it really kind of is for damage dealt, and it's better for a PvE environment. But Madness, after playing around a little bit more in player versus player environments, and kind of, you know, just toying around since I've come back to playing this game after a little bit of a hiatus to get the website going, Madness is a lot better suited for PvP than Deception is. And the reason being is it just has a lot more opportunities to get annoying crowd control down and really tie down opponents. So if you're looking for some crowd control and just to be somewhat just annoying, try the Madness build out, especially if you're just trying to go for damage dealt and some crowd control. So let's look at a really good build that I like to use for PvP. We're going to start off with Exploitive Strikes, as usual, because that critical hits with the force attacks increasing your melee critical chance by 9% is very beneficial. And also Sith Defiance, it reduces all the damage taken by 2%, so it's something that's really going to be beneficial in player versus player environment as well. But we're also going to be going for Crackling Charge. Now, the reason why we're going for Crackling Charge is simple. It increases the damage dealt by Lightning Charge Discharge effect by 16%, and reduces the cooldown of Discharge by 100% with Lightning Charges active. Remember, this isn't that beneficial for these two builds because in this build you're going to be more focused on Dark Charge, and this build you're going to be more focused on Surging Charge. It is in the Madness tree where I like to use Lightning Charge in a far greater amount. So when I say that this is very beneficial, get it in a Madness build. Just trust me when I say Crackling Charge will really help you out. Now, moving on up, we're going to get 2 points into Parasitism, which causes the critical hits from periodic damaging abilities to restore 1% of your total health, and 2 into Torment, which reduces the force cost of Thrash by 2 and Shock by 6. Now, we're also going to be moving up, and these are just generally good. I've gone over them before, but reducing the cooldown for Thrash and Shock is very beneficial to you. And making sure this periodic damage of parasitism is down is really good too, because restoring 1% of your total health constantly is just very, very good to have. Now, going up to the next bar, we really don't need to worry about oppressing forces or chain shock. You can go for chain shock if you really want to, but I'd bypass it in my Madness build, and I've seen a lot of other players that do PvP specking for Madness, and a lot of people bypass it too. So that's something that I'm also going to be going for. So I'm going to be putting a point into Death Field, because getting Death Field is extremely important. So make sure you're getting Death Field, because if you're doing the Madness tree, there is no point. Oh, I don't know why this guy's trying to get me into a group, but there is no point not to get Death Field as an ability. Now, we're also going to be getting Fanaticism, 2 points into that. And Fanaticism reduces the force cost of Death Field by 50%. Trust me when I always say, reduce the cost of an ability as much as possible, especially when you're trying to spam everything. And we're also going to be getting Claws of Decay like normal. Just increase the critical strike damage dealt by Thrash by 50% is very, very useful. And we're going to be also looking up to moving up to the next lineup. Sorry, I had to take a little break because do you know how to get your free Taiwanese recruit gear? No, I don't. I'll talk to him in a little bit. But I am recording right now, so sorry about that little interruption. Now, moving on up, we're going to be looking at the next line. We're going to be looking at Haunted Dreams. And Haunted Dreams lowers the active time of Whirlwind by 50%. In addition, when your Whirlwind breaks early from damage, the target is stunned. Remember, when you're playing PvP, you want to make sure you're spec'd getting that crowd control out, but also maximizing it as effectively as possible. So Haunted Dreams is something we're definitely going to be getting. And also we're going to be looking at getting Corrupted Flesh, because it reduces the damage taken by all periodic effects by 7.5. So that's something, like I said, is very, very good to have, because periodic effects are going to be something that's going to play a major role in PvP environments. And we're also going to get Raise again, because Raise is extremely powerful. Melee attacks that strike target affected by your lightning charge and discharge effect have a 60% chance to finish the cooldown of Crushing Darkness. And since lightning charge is the charge we're going to be using in this build primarily, I highly recommend you go for Raise. Now, moving on up, we're going to be getting Unearthed Knowledge, which Shock has a 50% chance to increase the melee bonus damage by 10% for 20 seconds. Very good to increase your shock. And even though we're not going for dual shock, it's still good to increase shock because you're going to be using it periodically. And we're also going to be getting Calculating Mind. And Calculating Mind, consuming Death Mark charges, restores 1 force. But to get it, I got to remember to get Death Mark first. And then I'm going to get 2 points into this sucker. And make sure you get Death Mark, because Death Field places a Death Mark on affected target, increasing the amount of damage the target suffers for your next 10 periodic damage abilities by 20%. This is very, very useful in PvP, because remember, when you're in a player versus player environment, you want to tie down as many opponents as you can with that crowd control. And you're going to be throwing down Death Fields as often as possible. But throwing down these Death Fields and hitting your opponents, you're going to be able to not only dish out a lot more damage to them, but just annoy the piss out of them. So trust me when I say Death Mark is highly beneficial to throw down and get for. Because if you're not getting Death Mark, I really don't. I mean, Death Field is only really, you only don't get Death Mark with Death Field in my Hybrid Darkness build. That's the only time you shouldn't be getting Death Mark with Death Field. It's just that good. It is just that good. If you get to this tier, just get Death Mark. Just trust me. Now moving on up, we're going to put 3 points into Creeping Death. And Creeping Death increases the critical damage bonus of Death Field and your periodic damaging abilities by 30%. Very, very good to have, especially since we're going to be using Death Field very often. So make sure you get this. And also moving on over, we're going to get Devour. And Devour increases the amount of healing generated by Death Field and Parasitism by 100%. So we're going to be using these abilities a lot. Make sure you get some points into Devour, because it is a very, very useful ability to get. And moving on up, we're going to hit up Creeping Terror, excuse me, not Creeping Tumor. And Creeping Terror paralyzes a target in fear, immobilizing them for 2 seconds and dealing 1,408 internal damage over 18 seconds. Like I said before, PvP is all about tying enemies down and damaging them. And this Madness build is just insane for not only crowd control, but giving you the ability to deal damage over time and to tie down opponents. And Creeping Terror is an amazing ability for this purpose. So when I say get Creeping Terror, I mean if you are doing anything with the Madness build or PvP and you spec into Madness, get this. Don't just half-ass it up here and then do a hybrid build. Get Creeping Terror. It is an amazing ability to have, and it is really, really, really useful. So just get it. It's a stun. It does a ton of damage, and it's really going to help you out in PvP. Now, moving on over here, let's go to the Darkness tree first. Actually, we'll just go to Deception. We're going to get Duplicity real quick because it gives you a lot more damage output for direct damage attacks, and they have a chance to grant Exploit Weakness. And Exploit Weakness is very, very, very good. It also allows Maul to be, you know, a little bit cheaper, do 30% more damage, 75% less force in use. So Duplicity is just extremely useful to have. If you're going to be building into a damage kind of build, get Duplicity. Sometimes I even get Duplicity with my Darkness builds. It's just a very, very good ability to have. And I'm actually kind of surprised it's on the bottom line. I could even see it being in the middle. It's just an amazing ability to have. So if you can get it, get it. And that's exactly why I'm putting some points into it. We're also going to be getting Charge Mastery because Lightning Charge and Discharge are a very, very big aspect of the Madness PvP build. You want to make sure you're looking at getting not only Lightning Charge down, but also cycling through Discharge to get maximum damage output in a Madness build. And we're going to get 2 points into Lightning Reflexes because it's going to allow you to get a little bit more survivability out of this build, and especially this class, because survivability is very, very, very key to playing in this game. And we're also going to get a point in the Lightning Recovery. Now, you could also go 2 points here and 2 points into Lightning Recovery. That's usually what I do, is I do just only 2 points here and then 2 into Lightning Recovery. And that's just simply because Lightning Recovery really allows you to get a little bit more survivability out of the build. It really just kind of depends on which way you're going with it. I generally like to get the 2 points into it, but if you're looking for pure damage output with Crowd Control, Duplicity is a little bit better to get than to go for the 2 points of Lightning Recovery. So that's kind of why I'm putting the 3 points in it now, as opposed to showing you what I usually go for. And it really just depends on how you play or how you'd prefer to play. I just find that survivability is kind of something of an issue for me because I kind of like to just run into things and help the team out as much as possible. I really don't care about dying too much in PvP. So I usually like to get Lightning Recovery just to give me a little bit more of a chance to live a little bit longer. But that's really just a call on your part, a call on your play style. Either one works really well, but this is kind of how I like to spec my PvP. I'm actually going to commit because I like playing PvP with this build. It's something that I like to use. So that's how I'm going to spec my Madness PvP. And there you have it. The 3 ways to spec PvP skill trees to get the maximum out of everything going on. I guess I'm going to group up with Rykel. He keeps bothering the hell out of me. So I think I'm going to group up with him, see what he's going to have to say. And I'll be back in a little bit. Alright gamers, I'm back. We're going to be talking about rotations. Now, I decided to get a little bit of change of scenery. I do apologize for taking a little bit of a break. But I did want to start the HK mission to try and get the HK droid because I love HK. So I'm here on this creepy ship. And let me tell you, the boss in this is kind of a pain in the ass. Got I was a couple HP away from killing him, but then he finally ended me. So I decided to take a little break and go into rotation like I said I was going to come back and do. So let's talk about rotation. Rotation basically, as I explained in the first video, is a pecking order in which you utilize your abilities or your skills down here to maximize damage. Now in my next video I'm actually going to go into more detail about the actual abilities and skills that the Sith Assassin gets, but I decided to at least give you the rotations that I've found online that have been really working out for me for the Deception and the Madness build. Now I don't really have a rotation for the tanking build, but that's just because I really don't use the tanking build too much. Darkness is great and all, but I've found that I'm really not much of a tank. My gear is definitely spec'd out more for a DPS, and as you can see I got my festive crazy ass Taiwanese gear on for this one because even though I've been rocking just, you know, base gear for my last guide, I decided to bust out my Taiwanese gear, which one of my friends in my guild just helped me get because I didn't know that I could claim the free Taiwanese gear. I've been wondering how to get my Taiwanese gear because I had Taiwanese accommodations, but little did I know I was able to get a full set without any cost. So here I am rocking it. It's kind of like I got a little tribal thing going on here. Need chilling with Talos. May Talos guide me. Now, moving in, let's talk about the pecking order for the Deception rotation. Deception rotation is going to be looking at maximizing the abilities to the best that you can in a good order. Basically, the way it usually, you can start off two ways. You can either start off, actually three ways. You can either start off by doing 2 thrash attacks, or you could go for a single Voltic Slash, and then you can move into the rest of the pecking order. Now, these two are kind of, it really depends on what you have. You use Thrash at the beginning of this pecking order. That is if you don't have Voltic Slash. But if you're at the end game level, if you're not at the beginning of the game level, to start off this rotation, I would use Voltic Slash over Thrash just because it does a lot more damage. It's a little bit better. So since you gotta use Voltic Slash a little bit later in your pecking order anyway of this rotation, some people like to use Thrash first twice. It really just depends. Now the third way you start this off is by using Assassinate. But since you really can't use Assassinate too openly in the beginning of the battle, I mean, you only use Assassinate when the target is below 30% max health. You really can't start the rotation off with Assassinate until the target's health is down. So that's why there's really 3 ways you can start the rotation. Use Assassinate if the target's health is low to start off the rotation when, like, basically since you're going to be cycling through this. Use Assassinate to start off your final rotation, or start off your rotation when the enemy is low health. Or use Voltic Slash or Thrash. Voltic Slash being more preferred. Now, if you do start off with Assassinate to start this rotation off, go from Assassinate into Voltic Slash or into 2 Thrashes. And then after that, after your Voltic Slash or your Thrash, no matter what, go into Shock. Because that's going to have your induction is going to be active, and you're going to want to make sure you get that shock off. Next, after Shock, go into Discharge. Discharge will... the reason why you're going to go to Discharge after this is because Recklessness should be activated, and Discharge is going to get a little bit extra damage from that. After Discharge, go into Maul, and then after Maul, fault with another Voltic Slash. Now, if you are out of force at the end before you start your rotation, make sure you start using just your Saber Strikes, get back up your force, and then once that's done, go back into rotation. Now, throughout your rotation, some people go, what if I skip one? What if I miss a beat? That's okay. You can't get a couple of sabers in there before the effects of, like, induction or recklessness fall off. Even though it's not 100%, some people, it's kind of rumored. I haven't found too much of a damage drop off in the rotation. Some people say that you have to get the shock off with induction down, discharge with recklessness down, things like that. I've found that, like, yeah, damage a little bit less, but it's not going to destroy your rotation if you have to get a Saber Striker or 2 in there if you're a little low on force. But that's the rotation for Deception. And we'll go through it real quickly again. Start off if you can with Assassinate. If not, go into Voltic Slash or double Thrash. Then move from there to Shock. Then to Discharge. Then to Maul. Then to Voltic Slash. And remember, if you're out of force, use that Saber Strike. Now, for the Madness build, the Madness rotation is a little different. I use Madness a little bit more than I do Deception. I switch between the two, but when I'm in PvP, I like to use Madness a little bit more. It's just kind of my style of playing PvP. For PvE, though, I would highly recommend sticking with a Deception build. I'm kind of still in a I'm in a Madness build right now, just because I had finished recording this video and we went right into doing the HK missions and things like that, and I just totally did not respec like I should have. But, you know, that's something that I would highly recommend you do, is to respec if you can when you're doing PvE missions, because I'm a little out of touch to fight this boss. I probably would have had it if I had a Deception build. But Madness builds, it's built around basically the same premise. You want to make sure you get a nice little rotation going, and to maximize damage, the order that I found online that really works out for me is you start off with using Death Field, because Death Field is going to be able to not only give you some nice little damage, but a little bit of health back. I mean, that's a ton of damage, and plus everything that is hitting that Death Field is going to have some internal damage going down on them, and it is a nice little ability. After Death Field, go into Shock or Crushing Darkness. It really doesn't matter. Some people have the double shocks, so they like to go right into Shock. I prefer Crushing Darkness, to be completely honest. So my pecking order, I usually go Death Field, then Crushing Darkness. After the Crushing Darkness, I go into Force Lightning, because I'll have Recklessness up usually by then. And then after you use the Force Lightning, move in for an assassinate. After assassinate, hit up a maul. And then after maul, I have to go into creeping terror. Some people say that if you go shock after death field, to use a crushing darkness after maul. But since I use crushing darkness over shock, I usually hit a creeping terror up after my maul. And then you hit up another discharge. And at the end of this, you're going to use thrash or lacerate. It really doesn't matter which one you use. Lacerate I find is a little bit better to use. But if you don't have enough force to get off the lacerate, go for thrash. So really, this rotation is a little bit longer. It's a little bit harder to pull off, especially if you get stunned. But the madness rotation is very, very powerful. Trust me when I say in a PvP situation, if you get off a full madness rotation on an enemy, you can just obliterate them. It's not as easy to get off as a deception rotation, especially in PvP situations. But a madness rotation is very powerful. To go back through it again, start off with Death Field, go into Crushing Darkness or Shock. I prefer Crushing Darkness. Then down into Force Lightning, move it on over into Assassinate, go into the Maul, then hit up Creeping Terror, move then into Discharge, and then finish it off with a Thrash or a Lacerate. Lacerate, of course, I prefer to use Lacerate at the end, but you can also use the Thrash too. It's really just however you really have the points for, but I always prefer to use Lacerate because Lacerate just looks cool. I mean, look at that. That's Lacerate. That shit's just cray. That shit's just cray. I don't know why I'm saying cray, but you know, we're gonna dance. We have a little cray dance. Now, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know I didn't go too much into gameplay aspects, but really, these videos points aren't really to utilize gameplay aspects. It's more just to give you guys an idea of how you should be building. If you do think that I should put some more gameplay to showcase what I'm talking about, let me know. I mean, I really wouldn't mind throwing in an extra video to showcase not only the rotations but some gameplay as well. I'm making these for you guys just to help you out. So if that's something you want to see, let me know. I really wouldn't mind going into an extra video. Now that's it for the PvP guide. I will be going into my next video. The part 3 will be going into PvE. Things to expect from it, things not to expect, party roles, how to fit into them, and I'm also I want to go through all the moves because there's a lot of abilities, and I gotta move my hotbar around. As you can see, my hotbars are a mess. They're absolutely fucking atrocious. That's just because I have not played this character in so damn long. Like when I first played SWTOR, I just went straight through trucking on my assassin, got all the way to 50, and then I started through my Jedi Guardian. And then I kind of fell off for a little bit trying to get the website up and everything like that. Other games just came in the way. And I love SWTOR, so as soon as I came back to it to hit up my assassin, I looked at my hotbars today when I was partying with some friends, and I was just like, what the hell was I thinking? No real idea what was going on in my mind, but I'm going to have to respect this up. I'll show you guys the setup that I like to prefer, my hotkeys, just some suggestions on not only hotkeying, but also go through the abilities just to give you a general idea of what you're going to be looking at. I should have probably gone for abilities first, but reason is most of you already know what the abilities do. So really, the next guide is just kind of going to be just a little basic overview. But really, if you're looking into the next guide, I'm probably going to be going a little bit more in depth, not into more party roles and PvE, things like that. And I really haven't decided if I'm going to be doing an actual PvE run to showcase group roles, but I'll look into it. I'll decide what I want to go from there, because the third video is going to be a little bit shorter than these past two have been. But really, if you've liked these guys, if you found them helpful, please let me know. If you want me to showcase anything specific about the assassin or things like that, let me know as well. Because another thing that I've really been thinking about doing is maybe even showcasing some gameplay footage of the assassin in action. And if that's something you want, just give me a holler, let me know, drop me a line. And also, keep on the lookout. My Jedi Guardian isn't up there yet. It's level, I think it's like 48, 49. I can't really remember where I ended today. I think I'm still at 48. But once my Jedi Guardian is up to level 50, I will actually be bringing out a comprehensive guide of the Jedi Guardian as well. If that is completed, like I said, there will be a link here in the video as well at the end. Just click on that. It'll take you right to it. I hope you guys have been enjoying these. I hope to get some more out, especially since me and Stash Burnside are playing through the entire game and getting it recorded. I'm also trying to get my fiance to play with us. I think she might do it, but who knows? We're going to be pushing, and if she does it, she's going to be doing the Sith Sniper. So if we get all these done, we'll be able to get some more guides and some more classes out. That's for the Sith side. Republic side, Jedi Guardian I'm going to be bringing out. I know on the Jedi, on the light side, also Stash Burn side, will be going through the Smuggler. I really don't know how he's going to prestige it. I don't know how he's going to prestige his Sith Warrior either. And then on the Republic side, I want to be doing the Trooper. And I don't think I'm going to go Vanguard. I think I'm going to have to go the other one, the one with the big cannon. I can't remember the name off the top of my head right now. But that's just because, I mean, if you're really thinking about it, the one can tank and it's kind of versatile. But, I mean, how can I pass up a giant freaking cannon? I don't see how I can do it. And I'm pretty sure my fiance on the Jedi side is going to be going for the Shadow, which is the basically very, very similar to the Assassin itself, but just on the light side. So that'll give you kind of like an idea when we go over a video with a build with that character, the little subtle differences between the two. But I mean, they're very, very similar, but there are a little subtle differences. But look out for a lot more on SWTOR from Token Gaijin Gaming. I hope you guys really enjoyed this guide. I really enjoy making them. And really from here, I don't really know where I'm going to be taking part 3. I really got to kind of plan it out, see what's going on, and see what not only my co-authors suggest in the site, but what you guys suggest as well, because like I said, these guides are really more for you. So what would be more beneficial for the third guide? Just let me know, drop me a comment, shoot me an email. As always, keep it locked to Token Gaijin Gaming, and look out for more MMO play, because Token Gaijin Gaming we're going to be playing a lot of cooperative games, trying to get a lot of guides out. If you play a little bit of some more MMOs, keep a lookout for some more guides in those areas as well. I hope you guys all enjoyed. See you later, nerds.